Welcome to the 8th episode of 13 Ways to Lead with your host, the 13th Command Chief Master Sgt of the Air National Guard, Chief Master Sgt Maurice Williams. Our featured guest today is Senior Master Sgt Amanda Calderon, the I.G. Brown Training and Education Center First Sergeant. I'm Master Sergeant Eric Gallion, and today we're talking about how to lead by being accountable. Establish an organization of accountability by creating a culture of healthy competitiveness. Allow people to make mistakes. Fail fast and recover. Fear of failure should never be an option. Here's your host, Command Chief Williams.
Hey, it's a great opportunity to be here today. Always on each episode, we have great guests and allow them to share their perspective and share it to the listening audience out there that they may see that some of the things that I look at as leadership principles, how it's affected their lives and share their experiences. And we may have a connection with the audience and things that we can share to help make people better, give people things to talk about. So today I have with me is Senior Master Sergeant Amanda Calderon, who's the First Sergeant here at the I.G. Brown Training and Education Center in Knoxville, Tennessee. And it's going to be my great pleasure to have a conversation with her. We have interacted several times, since I've been in the seat, and I'm looking forward to seeing her perspective on accountability. But before we get started here, I'll just let her introduce herself and just tell a little bit about your background.
So my history in the Air Force has been diverse and total force. Throughout my 18-year career, I have been active duty, reserve, and now I'm Guard. And to throw more total force on there, I am also married to an active duty member.
Okay, that's very unique. So all three components, and then the spouse of a active duty member that is very diverse. So, today's topic, we want to talk a little bit about being accountable, and I wrote that down as one of my principles because, as we look at the definition of accountable, it's the fact or condition of being responsible, and having that responsibility. And, just going back in my background as I thought about that, because, most of us, we're shaped when we're young, and I grew up in a single parent home, and my mother shaped me on the part of being accountable because she enforced me to be responsible as a single parent and an only child. So those are the characteristics I got from her and looking at her work ethics and that accountability piece. So is there anything that helped shape you when you think about accountability, not just from the military aspect, from your personal experience?
Absolutely. Actually, Chief, I didn't realize that you and I would have this in common where we came from single-parent households. And so I find that pretty interesting. But also, I would just say that I'm really thankful for my supervisors growing up in the Air Force, that they had a lot of patience with me because I think I needed that at the time.
Well, I can say I can say the same thing because individuals look at individuals like myself in these positions, but hey, some of us, we were some knuckleheads coming up. And my supervisor had to have some patience with me in doing some certain things, but as a little bit of shaping, a little bit of mentoring, it gets you back on track. I think when you have that foundation, it can help sustain things when you step out of line, make some mistakes.
I got a question for you, Chief. Now, you said you were a knucklehead in your youth or early in your career. Was that because of a lack of accountability?
I don't think it was a lack of accountability. I think within, and I'm speaking within the military, within that time period when I came in, we was in what we call a strategic reserve then, and so we had, in a squadron, we had 200 people in a very small building. So an individual young airman coming in, I could get lost. Mm-hmm. And so that lack of direct supervision and not feeling part of the team, that's what made me stray away and do whatever because nobody seemed to put any attention on it. So I would, come drill part of the days and leave early. That was time doing the Guard at that time.
That sounds almost like a lack of accountability from the leadership standpoint.
Correct. That's
at
what
that
it was.
point.
Yes, that's what it was. Not being focused on everyone and showing that responsibility to everyone, making sure everyone's there on time, following up with them, and making sure we was engaged and doing things.
Now, Shirt, have you noticed anything like that between the three, active duty guard reserve components?
Well, yes and no. I would say that it definitely heavily depends on the leadership that you have growing up in your career, but also it depends, just as Chief said, the size of your unit. In my very first unit, being an active duty airman, I felt that we had a lot more accountability early on because there were so many of us brand new airmen there at the very same time. So our leadership had their pay cut out for them when they had to mentor about 9 of us brand new airmen fresh out of basic training and tech school. Yes, we knew what to do, but being a brand new airman, getting used to that Air Force culture definitely was a challenge for them. But conversely, I find it ironic in a way that my role here now is on their side. So now I get to mentor airmen and hold them accountable, particularly students, if there are things that may not necessarily be a big, deal, but just to give them that mentorship, as I alluded to earlier, that I would have liked to get as a young airman.
Right. That comes from a organization shaping the culture in the organization. And one of the things is when you first come in the organization to shape that, and when we're looking at accountability, hey, we got to sit down and talk about the expectations of your job, of that particular organization. Hey, what are the goals of that organization? Or what are the priorities of that organization? What are the line of efforts that we're going to utilize to get to those priorities? And that helps shape that culture of people being accountable because, hey, we want to hit these goals. These are the line of efforts it takes to get to these goals. And it's just a simple expectation of sitting down with someone, tell them, hey, my expectation is you to be here on time. Hey, my expectation is you to finish these tasks each time we have drill, or whatever the situation may be. That helps build that responsibility individual, someone who haven't had that attention and that direct attention to build to them, make them become responsible, and they start building on that accountability.
Have you seen examples in both of your careers of good accountability and bad accountability throughout your careers?
I can say for myself, from my experience as a young airman, I saw bad accountability by not being seen within that organization. But then, as things changed and the unit had a downsize, hey, that's when accountability came because we had less amount of people to do the same amount of work. Now we had to start make sure everybody was doing their part. But it changed with the leadership and telling the expectations as a smaller unit of what we need to do to be successful. At that point, that was a change in my career and how I viewed being accountable and coming in and giving 110%.
How about you, Shirt?
Good accountability, absolutely, at the very beginning of my career when I'm needing to know more about how the Air Force culture can affect how I do my job and how important it is to know both the culture and your job in order to be an effective airman. But also, grow, not necessarily it being a good and bad accountability, but more for the fact what stands out in my mind is that accountability can change throughout the course of your career. So as you go from an airman to an NCO, your levels of accountability change because those expectations are different. But even more so now as a senior NCO.
So with something like that, it sounds like the consequences are greater too for lack of accountability. When you get in trouble as an airman, it's pretty minimal compared to if you're a chief or even higher. What would you say is essentially the influence for accountability growing? Is that something just you learn as you go through your career? Or is that something that you surround yourself with people that have that accountability and you choose to emulate them? Or is it something innate or something I'm not even mentioning?
I think it's as you grow, and hopefully as people grow, more knowledge and understanding come. And as they get a larger scope of responsibility, they see the mistakes can be a lot more could be a lot bigger than the other minor mistakes when they didn't have as much responsibility. And so you got to build a culture within the organization, and also who you surround yourself with. Those individuals, always one thing I always say, hey, if you're the smartest person in your circle, you need to get another circle, because those individuals will help you grow, and you feed off of those individuals to be successful. And those are the ones that, if you're growing as a leader, as a person, they help you grow. And I think that helps bring on that developing more responsibility as an individual, because your scope is getting so much larger.
What about the influence of accountability in your civilian life?
Well, hey, you got to be accountable to those family members that you're around, and people that are in your same circle, because, hey, that relies on the term I use too, is your credibility. How credible you are, because you're being responsible is a reflection of, can I count on you? Are you going to be credible in any situation, whether it's personal or within, your career field.
And in this age of information, being credible is incredibly fragile, because
Yes.
you can lose that credibility in as simple as a tweet.
That's right. That's right. I mean, information comes so fast now. I could be sitting here, and once I leave from this podcast, there's some new information out there, and I'm get to the next location. The airman asks me about it. That's just how fast the information comes. So I have to do a little. I always say, "Hey, pause. Let me do a little research on it before I make a statement about it," because the information comes so fast. I got to catch up with the information sometimes.
I would definitely say that personable accountability is kind of a two-way street for me. I mentioned in the very beginning that I'm married to an active duty member, so I think having an active duty Air Force member being able to have real conversations with me, and vice versa, we give each other a lot of unsolicited feedback and opinions about what we're doing. But I think that's one of the biggest pieces of accountability that I have for myself outside of work.
First, I want to ask you this question. So, if you're talking to a young group of airmen, how do you explain? How would you explain accountability based on your position as a first sergeant? Because one of the things is people first, mission always. So how do you explain to that lowest airman in a situation when they're dealing with being irresponsible?
Well, it's kind of funny. I actually had one of those conversations today, but the way that I handle most of the conversations that I have with airmen is talking to them about why they're here. A lot of the reasons they're here is for ALS and NCO Academy. So for senior airmen, I talk about becoming an NCO, becoming that leader that if you're correcting somebody on something, you have to make sure that you're also doing that the correct way. So you can't correct somebody whose hair is out of rakes if your hair is looking crazy. Same thing, you can't correct somebody on the color of their nail polish if you're out here with, fire engine red nails
Right.
in uniform. But also it's giving them the chance to give their side of the story. I hear a lot about how a lot of these conversations with the staff here, that when they had these conversations with their leaders as airmen, that it was just a one-way conversation. There was no, okay, is there anything else going on in your life that you need help with? Do you need to speak with a chaplain, counselor? Do you need some financial assistance? Because I would say that for myself as an airman, if somebody would not ask me those specific questions, then I would not want to volunteer that information myself.
That's right. Hey, it's all about about caring, having that empathy, because a lot of times, in a situation like that, there's other things in the background that's caused individuals to act that way, or sometimes they may not just understand their expectations clearly of what they should be doing or not should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. But a lot of times, hey, there's background information or something going on in people's personal lives that have them to react certain ways. But so that's why we got to show that empathy and give them an opportunity to explain themselves and provide additional information.
Absolutely.
And that's what we always got to do. Always start off with things that they're doing right. Hey, how can we help them improve, and then go back to the things that we agree on for them to improve. And I think that helps build that credibility between you and them.
And also an offshoot of accountability, and something that I just mentioned to some airmen today, is now that you're going through this training of becoming a leader, realize that you can also be giving feedback to your leaders. And so what better way to know how to lead your airmen than to get feedback from them?
That's right, because sometimes we think we're doing it right and we're not doing it right. I ask my team all the time, hey, what can I do to help you get better? What things do I need to change, or what things do I need to do to help you, to help continue the team to go and move the team in the right direction? Because we all got to be shaped at every different grade, every different way. We always look at that 360-degree leader, up, down, top, bottom, in any kind of way we can. So I think it's detrimental that we do that.
Talking about accountability and from a leadership standpoint, there's also you have to lean on your team to be accountable as well. Otherwise, it all falls on you. Have you guys ever experienced a subordinate or even a leader that refused accountability without realizing that they behave that way?
And I've had several. So, because I came in the Air National Guard in 1987. So we have changed as an organization, but back when I come in, it was just it was a one-way conversation, and whether they was wrong or right, they say, hey, if they was wrong, they say, well, you just did it because I said it. You, no question asked still. Not no explanation of why behind it. Like today, I think, well, I don't think, I know we need to explain the why. That will help people really engage in what they're doing to help the situation. So I had several during my time, during my career. And hey, I learned from that. That's why I can talk about it now. Yeah. I see that it was wrong. And hey, they didn't have empathy.
No,
they just said do.
Yeah.
Use a few words to go behind it. And but that was the culture then, as the culture has changed now. But I've experienced that and seen good and bad.
For myself, I remember being a senior airman, even a brand new staff sergeant, and my career field is 2S, material management, and just getting into not as getting into a situation, but having a situation where an NCO had failed to sign back out when they left the secure vault. And so things like that, even if you're not necessarily directly involved in them, can kind of influence how you want to be as a leader in the future. But that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, Chief, is that if you're in a larger organization, sometimes that accountability can be lost in the shuffle.
Yes, it can. Within this principle, as I talked about accountability, I also talked about failing forward. We got to give airmen and ourselves, hey, at some point, we're going to make some mistakes and it's going to fail. But if we recognize it and learn from it, hey, and explain, hey, this is why it failed. It's a learning experience. We're growing. So I always talk about, hey, as we fail forward, we just pivot and we make another decision. Fail forward, pivot, make another decision. Of course, those decisions, it's still calculated decisions, but at some point, hey, that's how people grow.
Yeah.
As long as it's not, causing harm to anyone in death or any safety violations, but we gotta make some decisions. That's one thing we look at is we gotta accelerate change, accelerate movement within our organization.
That does remind me of the phrase "fail faster."
Right.
And allowing those mistakes, which actually builds confidence. If you're given the opportunity to fail and recover, it'll only make you better in the future, to the point where you do a job so well that you can't fail. But you have to be given that opportunity.
I admire the opportunity to make mistakes. I feel like a lot of the history in my Air Force career has really been centered around leadership's failure of their airmen underneath them failing. And so, to give a personal example, just a recent example really, is I got my bachelor's degree 5 years ago. It has taken me this long to kind of work up that courage and get past my own fear of failure to apply for a master's program. So, being able to even just talk with airmen about that, but like, if that's something that you want to do, then just go for it. Don't allow your own fear of failure to hinder your progress or to delay you from doing something that you're really interested in.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I always say, there's still that opportunity there. Colonel Sanders started Kentucky Fried Chicken when he was in his 60s.
Wow.
Still
Isn't that cool?
successful.
That is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we shouldn't let time, age, or anything stop us from pursuing that and shooting for our goals.
It reminds me of that phrase, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So
That's
you
true.
can gripe about, oh, I wish I would have started sooner. Well, if you start now, whether it's 4 years from now, 5 years from now, you'll either accomplish it or you'll still be kicking yourself, I wish I started sooner. So along with accountability, there also comes a hint of adversity from it. There are people who may not realize that they're not going to be accountable. For whatever reason, they're going to say, that's not my problem. How do you address those people in the workplace who fail to take the mantle of accountability?
I tend to try to just address that by showing what I tend to do. And that's really what I think is one of my greatest attributes, is that I tend to call myself out. And it could be a failure or it could not be, but, trying to show that personally for me, if I feel like an interaction didn't go 100% the way I wanted it to, I try to go back to that individual, be like, that was not my best, whatever the case was, here's what I really meant. And so hopefully people can see that, behind this exterior that I present of myself, that I tend to also reflect.
One of the things you stated was a person not being accountable for their actions. I like the book Extreme Ownership. Hey, you got to own everything below you.
Mm-hmm.
If my team, if we are putting on a event, a huddle, or a course, and it's not right, it's on me because I own that, so I take ownership for it. So It may have been, hey, I wasn't direct with my expectations. Hey, maybe I didn't provide enough resources. Maybe I wasn't clear on the steps and procedures. So I have to own it, and that's what I would tell that person. Hey, you got to own it, own everything below. You can deny it if you want to, but it's take ownership. That's that go back to failing forward. So it's extreme ownership, that you own everything below you, and you just go and make some adjustments to get it to the level where you expect it to be, and what you're providing to those individuals that's out there in whatever event that you're having, whatever course, the people that you're leading. You want them to feel comfortable. You want them to feel appreciated in the work that they do, and they see the results on the back end. That's where it goes back to them understanding the why and how they fit in that big picture.
So John C. Maxwell has said, in life, the question is not if you will have problems, but how are you going to deal with your problems? If the possibility of failure is erased or were erased, what would you attempt to achieve?
Possibility of failure. It's always there, but one of the things I always think about, there's a solution to every problem, but sometimes it's tough to solve it. You don't want to go through what it takes to get the resolution of the problem, or it's very difficult to get to that point. But I always believe there is a solution to every problem. It's depending on what you want to take to get to that solution. So I think there's a resolution to everything. So it's about what you want to take to get there. So, see, Master Sergeant, I'm going to jump into your first sergeant lane here a little bit. Do you remember any particular thing that you have experienced doing your first sergeant training that touched on accountability. If you go back to even, I know y'all do 12 hours a year of training each year, even when you went through the first sergeant academy, as we look at and we talk about accountability.
Absolutely. So there have been many instances where you have to have that accountability for yourself. I remember being in the First Sergeant Academy, and we had fitness challenges, and you could kind of tell which flights were doing all of the movements correctly and which ones weren't. And really, I think, speaking of accountability, then you have these peers all around you that are holding you accountable. Just like Sergeant Silcott had mentioned during her podcast with you, Chief, is that she had a great peer group that would hold her accountable and vice versa. So I think it's so important to, as you said earlier, that you surround yourself with the people that can hold you accountable, but also the people that aren't going to be afraid of giving you that feedback that you need to hear.
Right, right. One thing about feedback, hey, are we willing to receive it?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's hard and painful. But, we got to be willing to receive it, and be willing to be coachable, be trainable. Those are all the things that feel when you have that circle of individuals that can provide that guidance to you. Hey, you got to be able to receive everything they're giving you.
Yeah. It's especially stinging if it's a constructive criticism in a field that you feel you are an expert of.
That is true. That's right.
I think that's where, you think you're doing something right. I've been doing this for, 15 years or 20 years. And then somebody said, well, just so you know, it's been wrong this whole time.
That's right.
Excuse me, what? This is how we've always done it. It's, well, there's a new process, and this is what the customer wants now. And so you've got to go back and think, am I willing to accept this change, or is it time for me to move into something else?
That's right. I mean, because, change is ever evolving. If we don't continue to evolve with the time, we will get left behind. And we get stuck in these certain ways. If we look into, different companies that did not evolve in time, like Motorola. We don't have Motorola anymore. Just things that did not evolve with the time and kept up enough with the fast pace. And that's just why, that's why I'm sitting here doing a podcast, because I'm trying to use a platform to still communicate with the airmen that are in our Air Force and our Air National Guard, because, hey, I'm a dinosaur when it comes to social media. So I have people around me that push me to do things and get me out of my comfort zone, but to stay relevant with the time, to still have that connection with people.
I find myself, when I try to give constructive criticism to people, I find myself I could see how maybe from your point of view it was this. However, let's try to meet in the middle somewhere. Let's talk about how to improve that a little bit. In a way, I'm really sensitive to kind of stepping on someone's toes as far as, this has been my career field for a long time. I'm an expert in it, but this is me trying to explain to them, I'm not insulting your knowledge. I'm not saying that you don't know what you're doing, because you really are. But let's just try to improve this one little piece.
You need to get the right one. They'll say, "Oh, I know, no, you're in my lane."
Right. Yes.
Yeah, especially since they've been doing it for a while, because they know. But yeah, that's it's challenging times, but we always got to continue to evolve.
Have you ever kind of coached somebody into accountability that had nothing to do with your job, it had nothing to do with your life? It was just a random encounter with somebody out in a market or on the street or anything like that?
Yes, matter of fact, I was at a restaurant, and they had a lot of people coming in, and they was taking individuals' names, and the host just started just randomly picking people versus going on the list of the sign up. And so this individual was training another individual, and I just pulled him to the side and said, hey, I said, now you're taking the list, and the party is the same number in each party. Why you're not going by the timeline that people came in to get signed up to be on the list? I said, that affects people. That shows favoritism. have an effect on your job, and you could have a lot of individuals addressing you based on the way you're seating people. Yeah. And he said, "Yep, well, you're right. Yeah, I just got overwhelmed, so I just started looking out there, picking people who had certain numbers." So he went back to his list and stopped. And plus, he was training somebody.
Yeah, I remember being a younger airman and just having such a hard time with getting feedback from other people, especially from a peer group. And to follow your example, sir, I have a really specific story of a peer. I think we were A1C senior airmen at the time. She had called me out for my purse, being out of rigs. Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just be smart and just turn it around. She's like, no, that's still the same purse. So
Yeah, sure.
As we're better in this uniform, we're better individuals for our family, for our nation, for the world. So every principle that I speak about is help building the individual for themselves and not just for the uniform.
You're essentially an ambassador on multiple levels, right, by being in that uniform. Right. So you've got to emulate the best of all of those categories everywhere you go.
Speaking of being an ambassador, I remember a recent experience where Chief Myers, the A&G ADF functional manager, had requested that I brief in his place for the Command Chief Master Sgt training course. And I remember just being very intimidated about the thought of that. But what I admired about him and, leading by being accountable is that he and I had several discussions about this speech. It was more of a guided discussion, but for the fact that he stressed to me that I am the expert in being a first sergeant in these recent times and that I know what I'm talking about, hit these points, but make sure that you're holding these chiefs accountable as being part of that triad and being able to make room for their first sergeants. But not only make room for them, but being able to give them that feedback that they need, holding their first sergeants accountable so then they can be that valuable team member that they need for their command team.
Yeah, that was a great example. I was there when you gave that speech, when you was briefing the command chiefs there, and so it went well, did an excellent job. Yeah, it was a few times I jumped up to help step on their toes yes. a little bit. On some things that they need to take ownership of because they're the functional manager for the first sergeants and wing command chief. So very good example there.
Absolutely. Even though I was so nervous about it, I remember being very good about holding Chief Myers accountable in a way because I kept asking him, okay, what's the feedback? What feedback do you have for me so that I can do better the next time?
That's good. That's really good. Was he able to provide that for you?
Yes, he was.
And with Chief backing you up, was your word even more credible?
Yeah, I think so because Chief Williams has a very passionate way of speaking, and so that really helped get me out of my shell, but also to drive more of those points to the chiefs and kind of, as the chief mentioned, step on their toes or ruffle their feathers a little bit. There were some things that I saw that they had recorded after I had made some comments, so that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, thank God for that passion. Where would we be without it? Thank you, Chief Williams and Senior Master Sgt. Calderon, First Sergeant, for taking the time to speak to us about leading by being accountable. Be sure to follow the Air National Guard on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And for more of Team 13, follow the Director of the Air National Guard on Facebook. Join us next month on 13 Ways to Lead, where we will be tackling the topic of leading by being accessible with Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Joanne Bass. From all of us here at the Air National Guard Podcast Network, have a great Air National Guard day. Team 13, out. 13 Ways to Lead is produced by Major Amber Schatz. Our editor and sound mixer is Master Sergeant Brandy Fowler. This episode is recorded at the I.G. Brown Training and Education Center at McGee Tyson Air National Guard Base, Tennessee.